Willie Sutton was a stick-up artist in the 1940s and 50s. He wrote a book in the 1970s. I read it. He was a common thief, but in this entire book, he wrote about robbing these banks as if there was absolutely nothing wrong with it, and telling people how clever he was in eluding the police. And he was clever. He was smart. He finally got caught. One day he was sitting on a metro, a subway in New York City, and a good citizen named Arnold Schuster saw him, spotted him. Schuster was a clothing salesman, but considered himself a minor detective. So he went to the police. He followed Sutton back to a garage, and he went to the police. This is on March 9th, 1952. The cops found Sutton. They locked him up. And unfortunately, Arnold Schuster, who was a good guy by all accounts, loved the press he was getting. He was on the TV. He was in the news. Well, one day he's on the news saying how he caught Sutton, and a raving lunatic named Albert Anastasia. He was dubbed the Mad Hatter. He was boss of what would become the Gambino crime family. And I will go into this in a minute, but Sutton had no connection or minimal connection to the mob. He washed his money there occasionally after some robberies, but he was a freelancer. So, according to Joe Valachi, who was a government informant before the McClellan Committee, he said that Anastasia was watching TV and he saw Schuster say, "This is how I caught him." And Anastasia yelled out, "I can't stand squealers. Hit this guy. Kill this guy." I just don't believe that's true. Anastasia was nuts, but he wasn't a spur-of-the-moment guy. He was a planner, a schemer. He was brutal, though. He ran the docks with his brother. And at that point, in the 50s, he had ruined the docks so badly that ships started avoiding New York City and went to other ports. And eventually, he because of what he was doing with the labor unions, he virtually closed the docks of New York, which at one time were enormous. So in other words, a banana boat would come in and he'd wait for boats that had perishable goods. And he'd say, all right, labor today is 5 times what it was yesterday. And what's the boat owner going to do? He's got bananas that are going to go bad. So it was that sort of thing. And then he'd extort the laborers, and he was a bad guy. He was eventually murdered. The mob got together and just ordered him killed, and he was whacked in a barber shop, probably by the Gallo brothers. So with that, this complete lunatic who was working for him, Fred Tenuto, Tenuto, supposedly took the order. I think what really happened was, I think Valachi was good for a lot of evidence. He filled in a lot of blank spots. We didn't know anything, really, about the public, didn't know anything about the mob in the 1950s. So Valachi filled in the colors. This is who's who, and what's what. But someone gave an accurate description. They said, Valachi was like a World War I foot soldier explaining the origins of the First World War. So this stuff, he also buried a lot of hatchets. I don't know if it's true I don't think it's true at all. I think Tenuto worked with Willie Sutton. They knew each other. They escaped from prison together. And it was Tenuto's decision to whack Schuster. Tenuto was a crazy guy. He had been in a series of prisons in Philadelphia since he was a child. He had escaped from 4 prisons. He was a stick-up guy. He probably, I don't know this, but he probably, since robbery was his primary income, probably worked with Sutton on some robberies. And he was a murderer too. He had a partner who had gotten in a fist fight with some punk, who knows who. So they waited and they walked over and found the guy that he had the fist fight with and shot him and killed the guy's father. He was also a principal suspect in a lot of other questionable murders. What happened was Tenuto found out, it wasn't difficult, where Schuster lived, and on the night of March 8th, 1952, Schuster was going home from the subway, and Tenuto walked up from behind him and shot him. And he shot him twice in the groin, directly, and one in each eye. So it wasn't a standard mob killing where the job is to shoot the guy in the head, once in the heart, drop the gun, and get out of there. This was a broad-based killing. There were a lot of witnesses. And it was, I think, a vengeance killing. Shooting twice in the eye, my God, what's that about? And then in the testicles, pointless. He ran away. The city was outraged over this. And it was the last thing the mob needed. They were, the Kefauver Committee was getting started. There was a lot of stuff going, attention was being brought to them. They didn't want this attention. And as far as the mob was concerned, even though the press was pointing to Tenuto, they knew who he was. They had photographs of him. Tenuto, by the way, was a little guy, little tiny guy. He was 5'5". Even though they knew Tenuto did it, they kind of blamed Anastasia one more time, which was another nail in his coffin. Tenuto disappeared. They never caught him, but there was a huge manhunt for him and all sorts of rewards. So the story was that he had gone underground and disappeared, and the FBI kept him on their most wanted list for an awfully long time. I think what happened was because of the pressure he was bringing, I don't think he went underground. I think they probably, under Anastasia's orders, probably killed him. It would make more sense. He just had to go. Tenuto had, his psychiatrist came out, by the way, and they mentioned that Tenuto was a, quote, moronic killer. He had psychopathic criminal personality with antisocial tendencies. He will kill, they said, kill and pillage without the slightest remorse. So he'd shoot a guy, sit down and finish his dinner. Didn't bother him at all. Another psychiatrist who knew him said he is, listen to this, a low-grade moron with poor apprehension and markedly inferior reasoning abilities. He's dull and energetic. This was written when he was a teenager. So his leaving the earth wasn't a big deal. I don't believe that he's roaming the earth still. The FBI is still looking for him. I don't think so. I think they just had enough